is the founder of CBS EcoMedia. And CBS EcoMedia has made a name for itself by connecting nonprofits to the ad dollars that every company is using. And he's created a mechanism to actually do that. So his social purpose was, how do I take ad dollars and this money that's transacting in this market of advertising and move it to do good? So Paul, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And Emily, thank you for inviting me. And Shane, thank you for this today. This is a great opportunity.
For sure. And so first question from me then is, describe to me your inspiration for EcoMedia.
The inspiration was to create an ad model to fund nonprofits. Really simply put, I wanted to harness the ad spends, the hundreds of billions of dollars that were going to be spent on the part of corporations in any case, and harness those dollars to help nonprofits that are taking on the most urgent social issues of our time, the environment, health, and education, and wanted to see bricks and mortar types of impacts happening in local communities from those dollars. And it has absolutely taken off, and it's very, very gratifying.
Pretty interesting. But your background as a surfer must have been the thing that really did it. Was it too much salt water in the ears?
A little bit. Yeah, no, a little bit. And it's funny, I looked at your boxes about, purpose and what drove me to social enterprise. I've spent, in fact, until selling my company to CBS a couple of years ago, I hadn't worked for anyone since I was 25 years old. I was a social entrepreneur and started two businesses, the first of which I was in my mid-20s. And I grew up in a small little beach town in California called Manhattan Beach. And when I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s and surfing in a very, very polluted Santa Monica Bay, I saw that the contract cleaning industry was operating illegally. So contractors would clean parking lots, industrial sites, manufacturing, even bioinfectious waste areas at hospitals, and let all this stuff run out into the storm drain system and ultimately out into Santa Monica Bay where I was surfing. And we couldn't stay well for more than 3 or 4 weeks at a time. All my buddies were sick all the time. And I started to see that the contract cleaning industry was operating illegally, and I said, you can't do that. And besides, that's a violation of the Federal Clean Water Act. And so in my first business, I engineered some methods for cleaning storm drain systems, industrial sites, manufacturing facilities, and removing pollutants that would otherwise end up in Santa Monica Bay during a rain event. And my first business became successful and took off. And it was really out of my own desire to see Santa Monica Bay be a cleaner place for us to surf and swim in. And that was what led to it. And then the EcoMedia thing was exactly the same. I'm sitting here around watching these hundreds of billions of dollars being spent, you're looking at all these credible nonprofits doing remarkable work, and you're going, there's got to be a way to connect them. And so really the last 25 years has been spent trying to help communities solve challenges by things that are right beneath our nose.
And I think that's one of the things that if we think about it, and the next question I think follows up on this. By the way, I started getting questions from folks via social media about 4 days ago, 5 or 6 days ago now, that were folks around the globe who are fascinated with this idea of social impact and social innovation. And so one of the questions that came out of it was, I see all this ad money, I see all these ad dollars being spent. It seems like, how do you decide what % of that should change, and how can you influence that change?
Well, that's the market issue. That's you got to keep it real. So going back to my first business, right? So we legitimized an industry, and the bottom line was, if you were going to let these pollutants leave these facilities, it was like get legal or get out. So we legitimized an industry. But the challenge was, and now we're talking about real business, you can't just charge whatever you want for these cleaning services. You got to keep it real, and you've got to be able to engineer it so that you can clean it compliantly, and it's not so expensive that people do either one, stop cleaning it, or in this case violate the law. And so we had to engineer it in such a way that it wasn't prohibitively expensive, and that people thought, well, doing it legal really isn't that much more expensive, so let's not break the law. The same is true of media. You got to figure out how you're going to provide efficient and effective media delivery to these corporations that are trying to sell something, and to create positive outcomes in the world that relate to their brand DNA, that relate to their brand values. And so it was trying to figure out what is that formula where you get enough of what you're already buying, because you've been doing this for a long time. You've been buying television, radio, outdoor, and interactive for decades. So how do we, sort of not modify that so much that you just can't wrap your head around it? And then how do you take enough of it to fund nonprofits so that there's a big enough impact that comes from that? And that's a longer discussion, but it's one where we were interested in working with nonprofits and communities where the community or the nonprofit had brought a lot of the money together, but not all of the money. And so there were gap financing issues. Solar installations are very typical of these kinds of things, where we use something called an eco ad to fund solar panels on parks and schools and community centers and low-income housing projects. And you'll find that a lot of solar projects are stuck over just a little bit of money. And so we created gap financing opportunities where we would take a percentage, and that percentage that we would put in would tip it over and get it from off the shelf and into the community. So there's a part of my business where people at EcoMedia all day long just source projects in local communities that are ever so close, need a little bit of gap financing to get them off the shelf and into the community.
This relates back to a previous conversation that was happening earlier when they were talking about microfinance and what microfinance looks like. Sometimes it might be gap financing like we're talking about here. Do you see potential for taking some of your money and doing microfinance work in relationship to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Our biggest thing, though, is about metrics. We want to be able to measure what the impact was. So we have a series of things that we measure, and then we audit our portfolio of projects twice a year. So every one of our projects is measured and third-party audited and verified. So, for example, we would be interested in, if we were going to be funding a solar installation project, what is the energy usage before and after, right? And what was the carbon footprint of the building before and after? And how many jobs did we create? And so there's a whole series of things that we measure. So if we could find microfinancing opportunities where we could measure, where they report back to us those outcomes, absolutely.
Do you think the measurement might be just in the repayment of the money?
You know what's funny? I'm not interested in the repayment of the money.
Yeah.
I'm not actually a bank. I make grants. So that's not, our business model is that CBS actually sells a lot more media to companies that want to have a social impact. The money's made there. So I provide grants to nonprofits, and I'm not looking for any of the money back. I'm not a bank.
Right. So then for CBS, what they're really getting out of it is what?
Well, they're getting a couple things. First of all, they're getting greater revenues because advertisers are now coming saying, well, I can buy ads that improve the quality of people's lives or ads that don't. Which one of these am I going to buy? So it's been very successful in that regard. But the other thing that CBS gets beyond greater revenues is, of course, they get to leverage their private media assets to improve quality of life in the communities they serve. So in effect, we are a revenue generator, and we're also a corporate social responsibility arm of CBS that has quite measurable and tangible impact.
There's a question over here.
Yeah, could you just actually give a quick explanation of how the business model works?
Yeah, so I go to corporations and I say, I'm not asking you to spend more money on advertising. Okay, your budget is your budget. If you've got $1 million budget, you've got $1 million budget. I'm not asking you to spend more money on advertising. I'm asking you to consider spending more money with CBS. And if you do, okay, I'll take a portion of that incremental increase and I'll share it with nonprofits that are carrying out positive outcomes that are consistent with your brand DNA. So I created 3 ad products for CBS: eco ads, wellness ads, and education ads. Eco ads, we take everyday ad spends from network TV, local TV, radio, outdoor, and interactive. We take the incremental increase. When an advertiser, I might be Chevy, and let's say, for example, CBS used to get 25% of their money. I'll make it really simple. ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, right? Each one of them's getting 25%. I come in and go, I've been getting 25% for a long time, but if you would consider giving us 35 or 40%, I'll take that incremental increase and I'll share it with projects in local communities that define you, that they're part of your brand initiatives. And I'll create a whole content package around describing that outcome. So that's So I'm not looking for advertisers to spend more money. It's a shift. That's exactly what it is. It's a shift. And then so through our eco ads, as I said, solar panels on parks and schools, through our education ad, we're providing after-school programs, scholarships, STEM programs around science and technology and engineering, math. We're providing bulk school supplies, backpacks full of school supplies for kids, musical instruments, musical instruction, because these programs are being slashed. We're even feeding kids healthier meals in schools. And through our wellness ad, we're helping communities take on the challenges of obesity and diabetes, early detection, cardiovascular disease. We're funding mobile health clinics, mobile dental clinics for going out to schools. We're helping literally hundreds of thousands of chronically and terminally ill kids in children's hospitals through providing them with iPads through the Starlight Foundation, and just like pretty amazing things happening from ad dollars that are going to be spent anyway. Yeah.
Question came in from Twitter already, which is great. I don't have to go to my little repository of questions. Alina had a question. She says, Paul, how did you make marketing green? This is really interesting. I want to hear your take on green, and then I'll give you a little take on mine.
Well, okay, first of all, and I don't mean to say it like this, but I actually didn't see anything green about media. To me, media itself wasn't green. It's only green if it's greening, right? There's some measurable or tangible impact that came from it. And so I was interested in how media could green, not the actual content itself be green. I think, I remember, talking to CBS about when they were first interested in buying our company, and they talked about how they felt that their content was a way to really improve communities. And I said, yeah, but I think really trapped in the distribution, not your content, but trapped in distribution, in that share that we were just talking about, is the opportunity to actually green things, to actually be able to measure that impact. And that things need to be put in context. If we want to talk about green, let's get involved in greening. If you want to talk about education, get out in the schools and do something about it. Or if you want to talk about health, surround people in wellness. We're out putting parks into local communities and putting fitness zones in those parks so that people that can't afford gym memberships can get a full body workout. So I think the way you make media green is have it actually green. I guess that's how I put it.
Yeah, I would echo what he just said, in the sense that if you're thinking that green is somehow just ecological, or that you have EcoMedia as your name, but it's more sustainability media, because it's focused on health and it's focused on the issues that we see as a community that are really important. And that's what's different too. So when we talk about green media, a lot of times people think about greenwashing, right?
Yeah.
They're just putting out that, oh, we've got this new and improved fuel that's eco-conscious, or we've got this new and improved X, Y, or Z product that's eco-conscious. But I would say, based on what you're talking about, Paul, is we're really talking about how do you create a service or a product that helps the community. That's the inspiration behind arts thinking.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting you talk about art, because I have said, as an entrepreneur, to me it's art. The actual execution is more like engineering. And it's interesting, the ideas are free, and the ideas are effortless. Like all the ideas and products that I've created or just throughout my career have been like, bingo, oh, we should do it this way, right? And that's free and it's effortless. But taking that idea from an idea and implementing it in a marketplace, that's a whole different ballgame. And that to me is rewarding. That action, figuring out how to make it a product in the marketplace that's scalable has always been something I was interested in. And it's about looking at things, I believe, very differently. I often say that when I was meeting with CBS and they were talking to me about wanting to buy our company, and we were talking about content, we were talking about distribution, and I said to them, advertising's like the sun. And they're like, what? These are senior executives of a major media company. I'm like, no, think about it. In the next 60 minutes, more energy will hit the surface of the earth from the sun than we will use as an entire planet in an entire year. But we think we have energy shortages. There's actually no such thing as an energy shortage in the universe. All the universe is energy. The question is, do we have the intellect and the will to harness the abundance that's all around us? So how's that like advertising? Well, corporations are going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars advertising the American public. And after a 30-second commercial runs, it off into the ether. It's gone. You might remember it, you might not, but it's gone. And my contention was, whoa, wait a minute. You can harness human energy. You can harness human communication, in this case advertising, in a way that works harder for advertisers and has a profoundly different impact on consumers and communities, and it's right there. So how much longer are we going to watch the sunrise and the sunset and go, I mean, how much longer we want to watch hundreds of billions of dollars be spent and go, oh, we could have leveraged it into creating jobs and improving the quality of people's lives, but we passed, you know? So she has a question there, yeah.
Yes.
One more. You were talking about the initiatives that you gave these companies. Are you branding those initiatives with their names? So, like, this is the Chevy cart, or how are you?
Sometimes.
So here's the question, just to repeat it back, just so folks have it.
Yeah.
The question was, since Paul's making the connection between the community project and the advertiser, are the projects that are being worked on then being branded with that company name?
On occasion, yeah. But they're really being branded on CBS assets. So we're going to tell that story on cross-platform, you know, network TV, local TV, radio, outdoor interactive, tell that story. We certainly don't want to turn a local community park into a billboard. That's not our objective. We can tell that story on our private media assets without having to disrupt a community. So I don't know if that's, yeah.
Along those lines that you talked about, the sort of limitless energy that's around us, one of the things that you mentioned was sort of not contrary, but a little bit counterintuitive to that before. We were talking about the final few yards, trying to make that touchdown of getting your idea, getting your concept through the door, out the door, either with other people or otherwise. But so what's the advice that you would give to get that extra mile? And how do you describe that extra few yards that you need to go?
Well, you know, we talked about, you know, the universe, and I talk a lot about analogies related to surfing. I guess guys that play football or people that play sports always use their own sport. But, you know, in surfing, you actually have to paddle through power as you paddle out in order to harness power and ride it on the way in. So the first thing you got to do is actually confront something in order to harness it on the way in. And I think a lot of that has to do between the art and the engineering. How do you take an idea, and then how, as an engineer, do you break it down into specific steps of how do we create a product out of this, and how do we, you know, launch it in the marketplace, and how do we, you know, scale that? And lots of people have the ability to do that, but we also talked out in the hallway about another example I gave, and I think this is the most important as it relates to being an entrepreneur. And that is, I don't really know that it's something you can teach. Like, I love art and I love music, but I can't make it. And I don't know how much time you'd have to spend with me to actually get me to do it decently. But, you know, I grew up surfing at a time when there was no internet. And we would plan trips to Mexico, and we would go down to Mexico for like 2 weeks at a time, and it would be flat. We'd just get completely skunked, and we'd sit around and go, we just picked the wrong 2 weeks. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. Now with the internet, you can get buoy readings as far south as Argentina, and you know way ahead of time whether there's going to be waves that time or not. So I had a friend of mine who's quite a student of surfing, and one night we're sitting at his house, and he goes, I'm getting these buoy readings. Look, he draws this graph, and he goes, look at this. This is exactly where it's going to be best. So it was just at night, 4 of us wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, we drive up the coast of California, and we show up at the beach, and what do we get? A lot of people always say it was flat. I'm like, no, we actually got exactly what he said we were going to get. So I grabbed and it was huge, and I grabbed my board, I grabbed my wetsuit, and he goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm going surfing. He goes, we're not going out there. I go, well, wait a minute, this is exactly what you said we were going to get. And so, yeah, was I scared? I was scared. Did I get thrown around like a rag doll? Yeah, I did. But it was the most incredible surfing experience of my life. And you can't ride waves sitting on the beach. So as aspiring entrepreneurs, you might actually design a business plan that's really amazing. And you might go through all of the spreadsheets and all of the financial analysis, and guess what? You might show up at the beach, and the question is, will you paddle out? Will you paddle out? Because you can't ride waves sitting on the beach. And so I spent a lot of time with young business students trying to give them the courage to paddle out and to understand that you will get thrown around like a rag doll, And it's challenging territory, but when you do it and you confront those fears, some really amazing things can happen.
Absolutely. We're coming up on the end of our time, but I have time for one more question which came in. I like to take audience questions over my giant queue of questions. I told you earlier I got like 30 questions queued up for you, and I'm like, he goes, they'll have to be really short answers, won't they?
Yeah, and then I'm not good at short answers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This was from Jack, and he says, I'm curious what steps, Paul, you took to make EcoMedia a sustainable platform rather than a one-off idea.
By harnessing what was already happening. So go back to the first business. I didn't create contract cleaning. I just wanted to do it in a way that was compliant and didn't pollute Santa Monica Bay. I didn't create media. It's going to happen anyway. I just wanted to see it happen where positive outcomes happened associated with it. And so I think a lot of times businesses do better when they are they take an existing industry and they say, how can I make whatever's going on here better for the environment or better for the quality of people's lives? And that's the lens that I look at things all day long. Like I'll see an idea, it'll spin around in my head, and I'm like, is there a way to take that enterprise, that transaction, where it would pay a dividend to improving people's lives? And if it can't, then I move on. I'm not interested in business for the sake of business. I never have been. Since I was 25 years old, I'm now just turned 50 years old. I'm not interested in just business that doesn't have a positive outcome. And when you're driven by positive outcomes, and I would say this to aspiring entrepreneurs in the space of social enterprise or social innovation, if those positive outcomes aren't what drive you, there's a lot easier ways to make money. Because not only do you have the challenge of starting a business that's going to be profitable, it's got to be profitable and have a positive impact. So you've got a secondary challenge. And I would say it's an advantage when those positive outcomes drive you, because when you can't make payroll and you hit those financial speed bumps that you will hit as an entrepreneur, when those positive outcomes drive you, you go back to the drawing board, you tweak and you refine it, and you accept that the marketplace isn't ready for it, and you keep trying to make it happen because you know that those positive outcomes are on the other side of that next refinement. And so I think that has to be what drives you.
And that's the reason why Paul and I could literally talk for like 2 years, because we see the world in the same way. But it's been such a pleasure to have you here, Paul. And make sure you guys check him out on Twitter, as well as go to his main